New York City has more billionaires than any other city in the world. At the same time that the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. And now, according to the Coalition for the Homeless, New York City has more homeless than it has had since the Great Depression. Many people cannot afford a place to live. Many people cannot afford to pay their bills. Many people cannot feed themselves or their families. Thankfully, there are places like Bread and Life in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. And thankfully, there are people like Anthony Butler, a former Franciscan friar, who is Bread and Life's executive director. This is his story.
All right, tell us what Bread and Life is.
St. John's Bread and Life is an emergency feeding program and kind of service deliverer. We're one of the largest emergency feeding programs in the city, did over 1 million meals last year. And those meals consist of, we have an on-site hot meal program, kind of traditional soup kitchen. We have an on-site food pantry, and we also have a mobile soup kitchen that travels to 2 different sites 5 days a week to provide food and services. We have a large service component. We have immigration services on site, medical services, help people get food stamps, signed up for Medicaid, Social Security. I have an interesting initiative called Project ID, which helps people get their birth certificates, non-driver's ID.
My role is outreach worker. I go out with the MSK and provide services for the clients that aren't able to come to our agency. You know, I give out referrals for detoxes, 3-quarter houses, assist them with food stamps, Medicaid if they need help. Mainly what my role is to provide a lending hand for the client that needs the help the most.
We have a library on site. It's a lending library with children's books. I think these are children's books, adult books, and a computer lab. It's hard to find somebody to staff this place because you can't just be somebody who can sit behind a desk.
Well, it helps that I'm a writer. I'm a published author. These are just some of my works. I'm published on Amazon. I'm the librarian here, the volunteer librarian here at St. John's Bread and Life. I was able, through the grace of the people who run the place, to be able to offer a writing course for aspiring writers and authors. And also I'll be doing a bilingual computer course because I found since I've been here this past month that a lot of the clients who come in do not know how to even use the computer, so they can't make use of the media room.
We do some of the traditional stuff of, we have a large clothing program or a large mailing address for folks who don't have a stable mailing address. Provided Christmas toys and food for 2,000 families. And we do that to kind of link the services and food with the attempt and the idea either to prevent kind of the folks' poverty from increasing, if you will, and also, moving them out of the kind of need for our services.
So what is your background? You know, does God and faith have any role in that?
It's what's got me here, and more importantly, it's probably what's kept me here. I come out of a kind of traditional Catholic family. Well, maybe not so traditional. Both my parents are converts. I was a Franciscan friar for 10 years, a conventual Franciscan friar. And so that whole notion of faith, and faith being kind of a, if you will, a normal thing, right, you know, or normative thing, and that you got to do something with it. It's not a pious kind of contemplative, sit back and just do no evil kind of thing, but it has to have an active kind of piece. And so I've always done that. I started working outside of Springfield, Massachusetts, helping homeless vets get benefits and things like that. We started at that time, it was Vietnam vets. Worked in an outreach center in Albany for several years, to Covenant House for several years. I actually met my wife there. And she was there working in the lay community, which was a 13-month commitment, religious commitment. She'd worked there for 13 months. I was her boss for about 2 weeks. That didn't work well. The marriages worked well, but being her boss wasn't good. And that kind of went through a discernment process, requested dispensation from Rome, and received that. And then moved on from there to kind of doing the homeless work and with homeless housing. But the whole faith piece has been important. I mean, that's why I met my wife. I mean, found a partner, if you will, who believes in the same thing and works in the same thing, raising our daughter in that modality.
You know, if you look at the Bible and teaching of Jesus, it's always really to help the poor.
Right.
And yet, if you look at where the country is going today, there's more and more Catholics and even Christians who want to cut off any kind of help to the poor or needy. And why do you think that is?
It's a disconnect, you're right. It's a huge disconnect that Matthew 25 says our judgment will be based on when we visited people in prison, clothed the naked, and so on and so forth. It's the only real thing about judgment. It says we will be judged on, and we call ourselves a Christian nation. I mean, it's particularly popular in the press right now, wherever. I think it was Stephen Colbert's pointed out that how we call ourselves a Christian nation and not live the Christian tenets, even as a social and political structure.
Because if this is going to be a Christian nation that doesn't help the poor, either we've got to pretend that Jesus was just as selfish as we are, or we've got to acknowledge that he commanded us to love the poor and serve the needy without condition, and then admit that we just don't want to do it.
I think there's some sense, there's a disconnect or a blindness that says we're somehow enabling folks, and the myth, that kind of American myth that people actually make it on their own, that everybody's pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. Most people have pulled themselves up by their parents' bootstraps and their grandparents' bootstraps, and various social programs. And we've not spoken out about that. We've not spoken out about that as a church very well. We don't speak about, as the Pope talks about there, I think of materialism. To really say this is damaging our country. It's not somebody stealing food stamps that's damaging our country. It really is the greed that's damaging our country.
Leading his first major service since his election, Pope Francis addressed the vast crowd in St. Peter's Square. He said greed was the root cause of many conflicts around the world and urged people to avoid materialism.
Ours is not a joy that comes from having many possessions, but from having encountered a person, Jesus.
Do you think we have an obligation to help those who are less fortunate than ourselves?
I think those have been given gifts, more is expected of them. I mean, it's kind of a pious statement, but yes, that we have to take what we have, our material resources. Everyone has to do that. It's not me because I come out of some privilege, I make some money. Everyone has an obligation to do it. It's the connectivity. And I think that one of the problems right now in the political field is people say, well, I don't want to share my stuff because these people aren't doing anything. It's not, we all need to connect. And that bringing together, if we're talking about, as the Gospels talk about, the kingdom of God is now but not yet, we have to work on the part that's now. It's not our part really, the not yet part. That's Jesus' and God the Father's part. But the now part, we have to work on. That's all of us coming together.
What do you think this Pope has accomplished in terms of the symbolism, the change of pace? Seems like people are really thinking he's a breath of fresh air.
He is a breath of fresh air. I think he's our Mariano Rivera. He's a great relief to all of us. And it really seems to me, Father Barron, who called him the world's parish priest? And it's almost been like we've been on a 6-month retreat with him. You agree?
Yeah, I do. I mean, he's a pastor above all. And you always hear the voice of a pastor when he speaks. And he thinks as a pastor. He's also someone who has a really great feel, I think, for the radical core of Christianity. So the return to poverty and simplicity, the fundamentals of the gospel. I think he's really good at articulating that. And that's moved the entire world, not just the church, but the whole world has been lifted up by that.
He's using the power of kind of his pulpit, the power of the media, and reframing things that weren't heard. It may not have been communicated as well. And one of the things I like talks about the church can become so self-referential. And I think that's what's happened. We look in on ourselves and make sure that we're taking care of business and forgetting that we're supposed to be this prophetic church. And he's trying to stop that. That's what I think is different about this Pope in recent times.
Tell us about some of the success that you've seen here.
Some of our successes here, one's an interesting kind of more statistical success. One of the things viewers might want to know, we use a lot of technology here. And our data has shown in our food pantry that folks use our food pantry for 180 days or less. I think it's 72% of our folks use the food pantry for 180 days or less. And then they leave our food pantry for about 2 years. This seems to point, we're doing some longitudinal studies, but that it helps them get over a hump. Because food pantries and soup kitchens deal with, folks are very fragile, I wouldn't say marginal, very fragile. There's not, very little can upset sickness in the house, one family person gets laid off, one bill gets a little higher, and they need our services. So we've seen that. We've seen around health issues. We have a gentleman here who's attended our cooking classes and has lost 40 pounds because he learned, and he's got his type 2 diabetes under control because he's learned to eat new foods. Yeah, we're in our demonstration kitchen, and this really teaching folks not just about nutrition, but kind of practical nutrition. The cooking classes really focus on teaching, primarily mothers, but not exclusively, how to cook vegetables so their kids will eat it, how not to fry foods, how to use unprocessed foods, because one of the things economically, unprocessed foods are cheaper. Right. To some extent than processed foods. And how to use stuff that's seasonal. Like we're sitting here with a thing of apples because it's October. We will show recipes on how to use what's in season. We partner with a farm upstate doing a CSA, CSA, Community Supported Agriculture. So every week, starting May-ish when the growing season starts, we get different, so we'll have the early spring greens. Right. So we'll do a cooking class of that, and then we'll give folks that to take home so they can replicate it. Also, you don't want to be you want to be culturally sensitive. So we're in an African-American community, and so we'll teach different ways to cook, I don't want it to sound wrong, but to cook collard greens or more traditional foods and things like that. Last year, we assisted 60 people get jobs. Our immigration program has been very successful, so much so we have to turn people away. We helped 500 and some odd folks kind of on that journey of documentation. It was very touching. Sitting here, a gentleman, wants to see me, and he comes in. How can I help you? He hands me $100, and I said, well, what's this for? And he goes, you helped me become a U.S. citizen, and I wanted to give back. Wow. And he'd gotten a job. And he goes, I working in a restaurant. He goes, I got a really good tip last night. So I said, thank you. It was very touching, very touching. A man who's just struggling, and I knew a little bit of his background in terms of taking care of his family, kind of classic immigrant structure. So those kind of successes. I think the other successes too we have, and we're doing some studies on this with St. John's University, are of hope. There's a lot of evidence that shows that if you can increase the sense of hope in people, you can increase the sense of you can increase the outcomes, which makes some sense.
The best part of doing this is giving food to the hungry. That's the best part. That's how you sum it up. It's just,
So is it a rewarding job for you?
Oh, the most.
The most rewarding, yeah.
The most rewarding.
It's a very satisfying job that you're able, to serve other people that I guess in this situation than we are.
One of the reasons I go to work every day, one of the reasons I took the risk of going to college, one of the reasons I took the risk of getting my master's and all those loans and stuff, is I had some sense that it would work out. I had some sense, and I learned that was given to me. Both my parents were college educated. That was given to me. I remember my father doing his master's while I was a young boy, that you could do it, that it wasn't going to fail. And a lot of the folks we serve have never had that sense of hope given to them. They're struggling just very much with the day-to-day issues of their lives. And if a place can do that structurally here, if we can do that kind of attitudinally, if we can do that but we can do that spiritually, that creates outcomes.
A lot of times when people think of a soup kitchen, I think we go back to those kind of Depression era ideas of it. And so tell us a little bit more why it's more than that and what new things that you've developed here.
I think we are sort of more than a soup. I even don't like the word soup kitchen, but I've never figured out another word.
Right.
But our emergency feeding programs, first of all, we'll take the hot meal program. Exposing people to new foods and increasing the nutritional content to address, because poor communities have the highest rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes, which is directly related to diet. Doing that. Using the hot meal program, the soup kitchen, to engage folks. Our food pantry is completely digital. Folks order off a touchscreen. It's a debit system. They're given a certain amount of points, more points for a big family, less points for a small family. We get shipments about 4 times a week to keep this place stocked. It's pretty real time. And this allows us to manage manage our inventory. This can be scanned out, so it removes it from the inventory. The inventory is set that if you took the last can of tuna, I wouldn't see it, kind of thing. So people aren't disappointed. Our mobile soup kitchen has services out on it. It's not simply just giving out hot meals. We have an office in it.
Also, this is what I need you to do. Do me a favor. When you go home, try to fill it out to the best of your ability. If you can't, come back and I'll help you fill it out, okay? All right. But we'll be mailing it to this address, all right? If you need someone to mail it for you, just bring it back to me and I'll mail it for you. And this is my card, okay? All right. So give me a call anytime, all right?
Mm-hmm. And what is your affiliation with St. John's?
St. John's University, we've always, when this place started, it started in the original St. John's University. St. John's University started here in Brooklyn, right. On Lewis Avenue, and like a lot of things in Brooklyn, left in 1957. This place started, as most emergency feeding programs started, in 1982, 83, when there were huge federal cuts in emergency food assistance. Started as an outreach of the parish, of St. John the Baptist Parish, giving out sandwiches after Mass.
It's nice. As a matter of fact, I was here when they used to give it out in the church, downstairs, when it's going to flood. So it's pretty good because I see the new improvement on the truck and stuff like you said. I was trying to get involved in it because you do got a lot of hungry kids and this helps out a lot.
When I came, St. John's University was looking to create a service component. They were looking to figure out how they could get the resources of students, the resources of faculty, outside the walls of the university, which is always a devilish thing for a university. They're very good inside themselves, but in the community they have a tough time. We wanted to keep our Catholic identity with the big C, if you will,
right.
Which is very important to us. And so we came under their sponsorship. They don't fund us. They do introduce me to the right people sometimes. But one of the biggest things we've done with the university is service learning, the Ozanam scholars. St. John's created this institute, Visa of Ascensions in Service and Action, and they created a scholarship program of Ozanam scholars named after Frederick Ozanam, the founder of the St. Vincent de Paul Society. And it's a half ride for the students. And the idea is they come and work here. And I think the difference, which excites me, is the difference is not you come and serve a bowl of soup, which is very hierarchical. It's a good thing to do. I'm not minimizing it. What it does is it takes the students in their disciplines and comes here. So we have a tax program that runs from Tuesday after Martin Luther King Day through tax day. We have professional tax preparers. We also have accounting students who take, they have to take a certification from the IRS, and they work here and help people file their taxes. The immigration law clinic that I talked about earlier, the students come, it's a 4-credit, so we have 4 people, I think we have 4 students in the law school who are working in that. And one of the things I like about that, not just the service it brings to the agency, and not just the free service, which is very nice, but it normalizes their interactions.
Right.
So they are working in their discipline, they're filling out a tax form, they're garnering the information and trying to navigate that kind of Byzantine world of immigration. And that normalizes, so it removes that sense of other, those people. And the minute you say those people, I mean, it's the same language you use in war.
Right.
You know, you dehumanize people. If we can do something that removes that, you don't minimize the differences. Right. You don't minimize, there's an incredible amount of differences, but that you reduce that sense of other, and I think that'll achieve something now, and hopefully it plants the seeds in these students that when they're making their money, when they're in their varied careers, they have a social obligation to do something with those gifts. And they've got to figure out what it is. Is it financial? Is it skills? Is it lawyers? Is it a kind of advocacy kind of world? But hopefully we're planting those seeds, that there was a connection made here. On this floor we have our human service department. We have over here in the cubicles, we have 4 case managers that help with helping people get food stamps, helping people get health insurance, helping people with kind of social security applications. If they're in need of housing assistance, we do some job referrals, signing people up for mail, helping people get phones. And our other cubicles are hoteling space. One of the things we've learned here is it's much better if a lawyer comes here, I would rather have them give me free legal services for somebody than serve food. Right. You know, but I want a space that they can be ready to roll. So I've got a computer, a phone, desktop, and ready to set those things up so we're not wasting their time. And this is our social service component. There's also administrative offices along here. We've also when we built this building, we kept about 7,800 square feet empty with the idea that as much closet space, that's how much junk you have. So we wanted to figure out what we were doing. And what we found out is we needed more private meeting spaces, a classroom, and more cubicle space. So we did another $1 million kind of expansion to build that out.
Wow. Now, have you seen some of the people who first came here just maybe for some food or anything like that? Have any of them started working here? Have you...
We tend to hire from the community. Mm-hmm. The sort of process is we have a lot of clients who volunteer, guests, who volunteer. And from that, you'll see sort of how people work.
Right.
And they're hired from that. So that's sort of our somewhat informal process. I always believe you can generally teach people skills, but you can't teach them how to work. So out of our 27 staff, I think right now we're running 19 are former recipients of our services.
Wow, that's an incredible
and rate. All but 3 live here in Brooklyn too, which has been great when it snows and we've had a hurricane. Yeah. We were all here at work.
Well, let's get into a big aspect of it, the funding. How does that work?
We are, this year, or this past fiscal year, the most recent, we've become about a $3 million concern. Mm-hmm. Of that $3 million, 91% is privately funded, which belies the whole notion that there's all this government money going into emergency food.
Right.
We've got like about that 9% funding, and most of it's food.
Right.
So, which is very good. I'm not minimizing that, but it doesn't pay the heat, doesn't pay the light, doesn't pay the salaries, doesn't pay the diesel fuel for my mobile soup kitchen. So I have to raise about $3 million a year privately. That money comes, essentially, it's probably split in half as private donors and half are foundations. Mm-hmm. And that's where the money comes from. So there's a tremendous amount of fundraising in this.
Yeah.
And so far we've been able to do it. But I've got to be able to convince people they can trust me to be good stewards of their money.
Yeah.
That when they give me $1,000, that I'm going to do what I said with it. One of the things that may be of interest is I think last year I spent about $240,000 of locally grown produce. We have a big commitment to buy from New York State. Mm-hmm. Either fresh produce or, if you will, value-added stuff. We're buying our hams for our Christmas program. They're all New York State hams, all cured hams from a local farmer. We buy sauces. We're buying the glaze for the hams from a local producer here in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. So some of the monies go to that because I think that's important to, if you will, to help the local economy.
Yeah.
Taxes seem to be more efficacious local. Money spent locally seems to be more efficacious.
Can you tell us a little bit why you wanted to leave the Franciscans and become more lay person?
For me, essentially it was loneliness.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was, there was an issue of celibacy. Mm-hmm. And there was a loneliness that was there that wasn't being dealt with. And I don't know if it would have changed if I didn't meet my wife. I mean, if meeting my wife sort of made me, made me aware of that more. Right. Though I didn't leave for her. Yeah. I mean, I was contemplating that. There was also an issue. I was a religious brother. I was not a priest. And I did find at that time that the opportunities for a religious brother were limited.
Yeah.
It was still a very clerical structure. And I struggled with that. Notion that in a community there was sort of unequal power, which I didn't care for. And that's something I was not criticizing and say I left because of that. I didn't. But that was an issue I was struggling with. And it may have just been kind of part of my own transformation. I was 30 then, I think, about 29 or 30. In terms of my maturing as a Catholic and as a Christian, that really becoming a man, if you will, a Christian, right. and that notion, thinking about things I'd never thought about. How do I really? There's something I entered the order when I was 18. And prior to that, come from a family. So I never questioned all those things or questioned how I was going to operationalize them.
Right.
And at that time, I really started questioning what was the best way that I could operationalize those. And marriage and a family initially was never one of my fantasies in my life. Some people have those. It was not.
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought I'd have children. It wasn't. But that notion, I think, as I moved to New York, that was part of it. That this city really fit for me.
Right.
So this is where I wanted to do things. I liked that crazy interplay that this city does, and that coming together, and the resources, and the banging heads together, and all that kind of stuff. I like that. I love the experiment of a city.
Yeah.
And I think that experiment of a city is very much some ways analogous or similar to that experiment of church, of all those people coming together and trying to make something.
Well, I think a lot of people would say that you made the right decision since you're helping so many people.
I think so, because it fits. I mean, there's, you know, it's the proof is in the pudding kind of thing. And I'm happy what I'm doing.
This is a beautiful thing that's going on right now, feeding the community, you know, because a lot of people out here don't have it like that. So this is beautiful. And I hope it keeps going for years to come, for the next generation and the next generation.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
Come on. I can't say much, but he said it all. He said it all.
Hey, Ma.
That's true indeed. Thank God for people like this. All right?
Yeah.